Welcome to the Stoic Storyteller, your sanctuary for raw, unfiltered stories about the darker side of human nature. Here, we dive deep into the reality of life, the toxic relationships, the bitter betrayals, and the quiet, calculating art of absolute justice.
My twin was declared dead 12 years ago. Then the night before our father's wake, his old number texted me, "Don't let her close the West Crypt." My stepmother had buried him alive, stolen his identity, and murdered anyone who tried to bring him home. My twin brother signed our father's will 11 years after his funeral. That was how Helena announced she owned the family. We were seated in the arrangement room of Sterling Memorial House, beneath a stained glass window showing angels lifting a man toward heaven. The same room where our company convinced grieving families to purchase better caskets, larger plots, and legacy protection packages before shock wore off. My father, Richard Sterling, lay one floor below us in the preparation suite. He had been dead for 36 hours. Helena sat at the head of the table wearing white instead of black. She said Richard hated mourning colors. That was true. He also hated public disagreement, imperfect ties, and anyone using the word fraud before he had selected a lawyer. Beside her sat her son Julian, our chief technology officer. Across from them sat my niece Sophie, Daniel's 16-year-old daughter. Sophie had been raised by Helena since Daniel's supposed death. I had tried to remain close. Helena called my visits disruptive. Richard called them badly timed. Sophie learned early that family love came through scheduled appointments. The family lawyer opened the new will. Richard left Helena the estate house, personal property, and voting authority over Sterling Memorial Group. He left Julian the digital records division. He left Sophie a trust containing Daniel's 30% share. The trust would be controlled by her legal guardian until she turned 25. Helena had filed for permanent guardianship that morning. Then the lawyer displayed Daniel's consent. A digital signature, a voice authorization, a biometric face scan, all dated 8 months earlier. The screen showed my brother at 42, older than the 29-year-old man we buried. His hair had thinned. A scar crossed his temple. He looked directly into the camera. "I, Daniel Sterling, authorize Helena Sterling to manage my shares and the guardianship interests of my daughter, Sophie." Sophie stopped breathing. I stood so fast my chair struck the wall. "Where did that come from?" Helena folded her hands. "Sit down. My brother is dead." She looked at Sophie. "Your brother abandoned his daughter before he died." The room shifted. Sophie stared at the screen. "You said Dad died in the collapse." "What?" Helena answered carefully. "We believed he did." Believed? The word rewrote 12 years. Daniel vanished during a storm at the West Cemetery. Part of the family mausoleum collapsed after a retaining wall failed. His coat, blood, and wedding ring were found beneath the stone. No body was recovered. Richard held a closed casket funeral anyway. He said the structure was too unstable to continue searching. I believed grief had made him decisive. Now I understood urgency might have protected something else. The lawyer said Daniel survived with severe neurological injuries and entered long-term private treatment under a protected identity. "Who knew?" I asked. Helena glanced toward Richard's empty chair. "Your father. Who else?" Julian adjusted his cuff. "I learned last year." Sophie whispered, "Did Dad know me?" No one answered quickly enough. She left the room. Helena told a staff member to follow her. I blocked the door. No employee touches her. Helena's expression cooled. She is a minor in crisis. She just learned her dead father signed her away. He protected her from an unstable man. "You mean himself?" "I mean Daniel." That sentence contained fear, not contempt. My brother had become dangerous to the people who kept him hidden. I demanded the clinic name. The lawyer refused under medical privacy. Daniel's privacy had somehow authorized Helena to show his face, while preventing us from locating his body. Julian said the video was valid, witnessed, and encrypted through Sterling's identity platform. He built that platform. Our company used it to verify death certificates, probate instructions, and prepaid funeral contracts. If Julian could make the dead speak, every estate we managed was vulnerable. I looked at the screen again. Daniel blinked at uneven intervals. His left hand remained below the frame. As children, we used one signal when adults watched us. 2 taps, pause, 1. The video had no sound beneath his voice, but the waveform showed 3 tiny impacts against the table. 2, pause, 1, help. My phone vibrated inside my bag. The number belonged to Daniel. I had kept it saved for 12 years. The message contained 6 words. "Let her close the West Crypt." A second message appeared. Dead, die of a heart attack. I looked through the arrangement room glass toward the stairs leading to the preparation suite. Richard's wake was scheduled for the next evening. Helena planned to close the West Crypt immediately after. My dead twin had signed the will. Now he was telling me our father had been murdered. The West Crypt sat beneath the oldest section of Sterling Cemetery, half a mile from the memorial house. Our family built it in 1904, when wealth still expected stone to announce permanence. The front held 6 marble doors engraved with Sterling names. The rear descended into maintenance chambers, drainage tunnels, and storage rooms that appeared on no public map. Daniel disappeared there 12 years earlier. After the collapse, Richard sealed the area and told regulators the foundation remained unstable. The structure had been repaired within 6 months. The doors stayed locked. I reached the crypt at midnight with Detective, the county investigator assigned to Richard's death. I had not told Helena. I had told everything except the messages from Daniel's number. Trust is difficult after a family teaches you that information is a currency. Examined Richard's preliminary report. Official cause: cardiac arrest following a medication interaction. No autopsy. Helena produced an advance directive forbidding invasive examination. Richard supposedly signed it 2 weeks earlier. The signature came through Julian's platform. Another dead man speaking digitally said the medical examiner accepted it because Sterling Memorial handled half the county's indigent burials and maintained contracts with 3 hospitals. My family did not need to bribe every institution. It only needed to become useful enough that questions felt disruptive. The crypt door recognized my face and opened. That frightened me more than if Helena had changed the lock. Someone expected me. Inside, the air smelled of cold stone, rust, and something medicinal. Our flashlight beams crossed empty shelves. At the rear wall, I found Daniel's name scratched into mortar. Not old. Fresh white dust remained beneath the letters. A narrow service door stood behind a curtain of funeral drapery. Its keypad requested a deceased client number. Daniel's old employee ID opened it. The room beyond contained a hospital bed, oxygen cylinders, restraints, and a voice recording station. The mattress was warm. Touch the blanket. Someone was here within the hour. On the wall hung 12 photographs of Sophie. School portraits, birthday parties, the first day of secondary school. Pictures taken through windows and from parking lots. Daniel had watched his daughter grow from hiding. Or someone wanted us to think he had. The recording station held one active file. My brother's face appeared. Same scar, same older eyes. If you found this room, Helena moved me again. He looked toward someone outside the frame. Do not believe she kept me alive. Mr. Bell did. Thomas Bell had managed Sterling Cemetery since before we were born. He taught Daniel and me to ride bicycles between mausoleums when Richard was too busy and Helena had not yet entered our lives. Bell retired 6 months after Daniel's disappearance. He died 2 days before Richard. A fall down the crematorium stairs. No autopsy. Daniel continued. 12 years ago, I discovered they were reopening old graves and moving bodies to unregistered ground. They sold the plots twice, then used the abandoned estates to fund acquisitions. Helena drugged me in this room. She sealed the drainage door and opened the flood valve. My stomach tightened. The storm collapse had not buried him. The crypt flooded around him. Bell heard me through the maintenance line. He pulled me out. I had a skull fracture and no memory for months. Daniel's hand appeared at the bottom of the frame. 2 taps. Pause. 1. The same plea hidden inside the will video. My father told Bell that if the truth came out, Helena would blame him and the company would collapse. Dad moved me into Orison Neurological Center under the name David Reed. Wrote the name. Daniel's voice broke. I agreed at first. Sophie was 4. Dad said Helena would take her if I became the unstable man who survived his own death. He looked directly into the camera. I let my daughter mourn me because I believed a hidden father was safer than a public patient. The confession hurt because it made him more than a victim. He had participated in the lie. Then he said, last year, I remembered enough to ask for release. Dad promised to bring me home after he transferred the company out of Helena's control. Yesterday, he called and said the new will was ready. The screen flickered. 3 hours later, Julian came with a consent video and a syringe. The file ended. Behind us, a metal vent released one slow breath of air. Found a hidden cavity beneath the bed. Inside lay Richard's watch, Thomas Bell's cemetery keys, and a sealed vial labeled with Daniel's false name. The door slammed. The ventilation stopped. Water began entering through the floor drains. Helena had rebuilt the room exactly as it was the night she buried my twin alive. This time, she intended the crypt to keep us. Shot the flood control panel. The first bullet broke the plastic. The second severed the relay. Water continued rising for 11 seconds, then slowed around our ankles. The crypt door remained locked. I used Thomas Bell's cemetery key on a mechanical slot hidden behind the recording station. The rear wall opened into a drainage tunnel barely wide enough to crawl through. Bell had built an escape route, perhaps after rescuing Daniel, perhaps before, because he already knew what the family could do. We emerged behind the crematorium at 1:26 a.m. Security cameras turned toward us. Julian's system announced a maintenance alarm, said now they know exactly what we found. A hearse left the rear garage. The license plate belonged to Bell Funeral Transport, a small company Thomas supposedly closed after retirement. We followed. The hearse drove to a county storage facility where unclaimed bodies waited for burial. It entered through a service gate controlled by Sterling Memorial. Inside, we found Thomas Bell, alive. He sat in a refrigerated records room, wearing the same gray suit used in his funeral photograph. A bruise darkened one temple. He looked at me and said, "You took too long." The man, reported dead after falling down the crematorium stairs, had never reached the morgue. Helena the transfer and held him here. Whose body was buried? I asked. Bell looked toward the rows of metal drawers. A man named Samuel Price. No family. Sterling handled the county contract. An unclaimed body had become a groundskeeper because paperwork required one. Bell explained that after Daniel survived the crypt, Richard ordered him to move the boy to Orison. Helena believed Daniel had drowned. Richard wanted to protect his son and the company. When Daniel's memory returned, Richard confessed the truth to Helena. She did not kill Daniel again. She found a better use for him. His legal identity controlled 30% of the company and a trust for Sophie. Helena kept him confined while Julian created signatures, voice authorizations, and medical reports declaring him intermittently competent whenever a transaction required consent. Why did Dad allow it? I asked. Bell gave the answer I already feared. Because Daniel's shares stopped Helena from selling the company. Richard told himself a controlled fraud was better than losing everything. Every Sterling crime arrived disguised as the smaller harm. Bell had helped. He transported Daniel, signed false burial records, carried letters to Sophie that Richard never delivered. Why didn't you tell me? Your father said Helena would take Sophie and have Daniel committed through court. And you believed him. I believed power. The distinction mattered. Bell said Richard changed his mind after discovering Helena and Julian were transferring abandoned estates into a shell company. He planned to reveal Daniel alive at the wake and dissolve Sterling Memorial into a restitution trust. He recorded a confession. Then he died. Bell tried to deliver the recording too. Julian's security team caught him, staged the fall, and placed him in storage. Asked where the confession was, Bell said inside Richard's coffin. My father had turned his own wake into an evidence transfer. The coffin sat in our preparation suite under Helena's control. Bell reached into his jacket and removed a small brass handle shaped like an angel. It opens the false bottom. A noise came from the corridor. The refrigeration system stopped. The metal body drawers began unlocking one by one. Julian's voice entered the speakers. Detectives step away from Mr. Bell. Drew her weapon. Security officers entered from both ends. Not police. Sterling Private Recovery. Their uniforms said Dignity Response. Our company had branded force as compassion. Julian appeared on a tablet mounted to the wall. He told she was trespassing in protected county storage and interfering with a high-risk patient. Bell, the living man, had been declared dead, then classified as a confused body thief using a deceased employee's identity. He had died twice, once in records, once in credibility. Julian said I was experiencing acute grief and identity delusion related to Daniel. Activated her body camera. The system remotely disabled it. Bell whispered, "Drawer 17. I opened it. No body, only a portable transmitter. He had expected capture. I pressed the switch. Every unlocked body drawer began broadcasting its internal inventory to an external server. Names, photographs, death certificates, Sterling transfer records, evidence that unclaimed bodies had been substituted for private clients. Julian's face disappeared from the screen. Security moved toward us. Then county police sirens approached outside. Bell's transmitter had sent the files to every family whose missing relative appeared in the drawers. The dead had called their own witnesses, but Richard's coffin remained inside Helena's house, and the wake was less than 18 hours away. Richard selected his coffin 6 months before he died. Sterling sovereign, walnut, hand-carved angels, triple lock ceiling system, retail price $48,000, manufacturing cost $3,800. He had spent his life turning grief into margin and called it service. Now he had converted the product into a vault. Mr. Bell explained the false bottom. Richard designed it with a carpenter who died before installation. The brass angel unlocked a compartment beneath the lining without disturbing the body. Inside should be a recorder, original share certificates, and the burial ledger proving graves had been reused. Helena scheduled the coffin to remain closed during the wake. She said Richard wanted dignity. He wanted evidence hidden until I opened it. Again, a dead man assigning risk to the living. Obtained a warrant for the coffin based on Bell's testimony. The county judged it within 12 minutes, citing funeral sanctity and insufficient proof Bell was legally alive. The identity problem became a shield. Bell's fingerprints matched old employment records, but Sterling's database now listed those records as compromised. Julian controlled the archive that proved who everyone was. Said we could seek a federal warrant. Not before the wake. Helena called me at dawn. You entered a sealed crypt and traumatized an elderly man. He is not dead. He believes that too. You held him in cold storage. A medical contractor placed him there after he became violent. You staged his funeral to protect him from whoever was using his identity. Every accusation returned polished. She invited me to Richard's wake, not out of reconciliation. The family expected my absence to look like guilt. She also wanted me watched. I will come, I said. Her pause lasted half a second. Wear black. She ended the call. Sophie texted from a hidden school account. Grandma says Dad was sick and chose not to see me. I answered, he was sick. He also chose wrong. Both can be true. She replied, is he alive? I wrote, I believe so. 3 dots appeared, vanished, appeared again. Then, bring HIM. My niece had reduced the entire investigation to the one thing adults kept treating as secondary. Bring her father home. Located Orison Neurological Center. It had closed officially 3 years earlier after a patient safety scandal. Utility records showed active electricity and medical deliveries. The property belonged to a Sterling shell company. Bell gave us a service map. Before we left, he caught my arm. Daniel may not want to come. He sent the messages. He wants the truth out. That is not the same as wanting a life inside it. The clinic sat beyond an abandoned convent, hidden behind trees and a locked stone gate. Inside, the corridors smelled of disinfectant and wet plaster. Patient files used numbers instead of names. Room 12 contained Daniel's clothes, medication schedule, and photographs of Sophie. No Daniel. A note lay on the bed. ELISC, if you find me, do not let them make my survival a reunion. The next line, I helped Dad hide other people, found the clinic archive. Daniel's false identity was not unique. 17 patients had been declared dead under their real names, then moved into Sterling-controlled facilities after inheritance disputes, guardianship cases, or complaints. Some had cognitive injuries. Some did not. Richard and Helena used legal death to remove inconvenient heirs while managing their estates. Daniel had translated records, recorded consent videos, and coached patients through biometric prompts. At first under coercion, later for privileges, he earned access to Sophie's photographs by helping the system that kept him hidden. My twin had become one of the people who stole identities. A blood smear marked the archive door. Fresh. Behind a cabinet, we found Julian's phone. The screen displayed a live location, Sterling Memorial House. He was already at the wake. A final message had been sent from Daniel's number. He took me to Dad. My brother and father were now in the same building. One alive, one dead, both inside coffins Helena controlled. The Orison files contained 17 legal deaths. A widow declared incompetent after accusing her son of stealing property. A disabled heir removed from a trust dispute. A funeral director who discovered reused burial plots. A nurse who questioned medication at a Sterling facility. A county clerk who refused to backdate death certificates. And Daniel. The clinic called them continuity residents, a phrase broad enough to hide imprisonment. Richard signed every admission. Helena approved every financial transfer. Julian built the identity tools. Daniel recorded 11 consent videos. I watched one. A woman named Collins sat beside him. She asked to call her sister. Daniel said, If you cooperate, they may allow contact. The same promise Richard gave him. He had learned the cage well enough to explain it gently. Said coercion mattered. So did repetition. I wanted my brother to be only the man buried alive. The archive showed the person he became while surviving. One file contained my name. Evaluation subject, Elise Sterling. Helena requested a profile after I challenged the company's indigent burial account 7 years earlier. The report described me as obsessive, emotionally reactive, and vulnerable to twin fixation. Daniel contributed observations. He told the evaluator I had difficulty releasing unanswered questions. True, the report recommended monitoring, not confinement. My brother had helped create the language Helena later used against me. He may have done it to prevent a harsher finding. He still did it. The family's crimes survived because everyone could identify a worse alternative. We left the clinic with mirrored copies. Federal agents agreed to secure the patients after. Sent the archive to a judge outside Sterling's local network. The first clean institution arrived because we stopped asking the family's county for permission. On the drive back, Sophie called. Helena sat beside her. The call was supervised. Sophie said the wake program included a message from Dad. What message? A video. Grandma says he will explain why he stayed away. Helena entered the frame. Daniel wanted his daughter to understand his illness before the public began exploiting him. You took him from Orison. I removed a patient during a security breach. Where is he? Safe. Let me speak to him. He is not capable. He signed your will. Her eyes narrowed. Competent when transferring shares. Incapable when answering his sister. Sophie looked between us. Is Dad coming to Grandpa's wake? Helena answered, in the only way that will not harm you. A video, edited, dead enough to control. I asked Sophie to show me the program. She held it toward the camera. At 8:30 p.m., Daniel Sterling final testimony. At 9:00, family continuity ratification. At 9:15, guardianship blessing for Sophie. A board vote, legal hearing, and adoption ceremony disguised as memorial ritual. Helena planned to become Sophie's permanent guardian and gain Daniel's shares before anyone proved he was alive. I said, do not sign anything. Helena ended the call. My lawyer reviewed the public will. If Daniel appeared alive before ratification, Helena's authority could be challenged. If he appeared medically incompetent, her existing guardianship over him might control his shares anyway. She needed his body hidden and his image visible. Received a warrant for Julian's arrest based on clinic records. County officers reported he had not entered Sterling Memorial. His phone remained there. A decoy. Bell checked the cemetery service map. The preparation suite connected to an underground embalming tunnel leading to the West Crypt. Richard's coffin could move without passing cameras. Helena was not bringing Daniel to the wake. She was returning him to the place she tried to drown him. Then the memorial house announced a private family viewing at 6:00 p.m. 2 coffins had been placed in the room. One for Richard, one labeled Daniel Sterling, memorial remains. My brother's second funeral had been scheduled while he was still breathing. Sophie inherited Daniel's shares on the legal date of his death. If Daniel was alive, the inheritance returned to him. If he was alive but incompetent, his court-appointed guardian controlled the shares. Helena held that guardianship through a sealed order Richard helped obtain 11 years earlier. If Daniel died now, Sophie inherited again. Helena's permanent guardianship over Sophie would control everything. My brother's death benefited her twice. His survival benefited her once. That was why she kept him breathing. Until the wake, Sophie sent me a photograph from the memorial house. The second coffin stood beneath Daniel's portrait. It was smaller than Richard's, intended to hold recovered fragments from the old crypt collapse. Helena told guests new remains had been identified. No forensic report existed. She planned to place Daniel inside after sedation, seal the coffin, and complete a cremation before midnight. A living man could become his own recovered body. Sterling Memorial owned the crematorium, the death certificates, and the transport. The entire family business was an instrument. Organized federal entry for 8:00 p.m. when the public began. Earlier action risked Helena moving Daniel through unknown cemetery tunnels. I hated waiting. Sophie had spent years waiting for adults to choose her over strategy. I entered the memorial house at 5:45 wearing black and carrying the brass angel in my coat. Helena greeted me beside Richard's coffin. She looked perfect. No grief swelling, no ash, no sign that her stepson, husband, and business were collapsing around her. You came. You invited me. I invited my daughter. I am not your daughter. You accepted my home for 23 years. She believed shelter created kinship debt. The arrangement room had been transformed into a private viewing parlor. Richard's coffin rested open. His face had been prepared into a calm he never possessed in life. The second coffin remained closed. Sophie stood near it, wearing a black dress and Daniel's old signet ring on a chain. Grandma says Dad wanted me to have it. The ring had been found in the West Crypt after Daniel disappeared. If he survived, he had not left it voluntarily. Helena placed theft around Sophie's neck and called it inheritance. I hugged her. A security officer stepped closer. She whispered, "There is knocking." "From where?" She looked at the second coffin. I kept my face still. Helena announced Daniel's memorial video would begin after the family viewing. She asked me to speak privately in Richard's preparation room. The moment the door closed, she held out a document. A statement. I had entered the West Crypt while mentally unstable, fabricated Daniel's survival, assaulted security, and manipulated Sophie to disrupt Richard's final wishes. In exchange for signing, Helena would place Sophie with an independent boarding school rather than seek full adoption. She expected me to consider exile a rescue. What happens to Daniel? Daniel died 12 years ago. Who is in the coffin? Remains. I stepped closer. I heard him. You hear him often. The report entered her voice. I said Dad planned to expose you. Richard planned many moral gestures after benefiting from practical decisions. Did you kill him? He stopped taking medication correctly. Did you alter it? He had a weak heart. No answer. She told me Richard's confession would implicate me. I had worked in compliance during the period when reused graves and estate transfers expanded. My signatures appeared on reports declaring no material irregularity. True, I had accepted Richard's explanations. I left the company 8 years earlier, but not before receiving dividends. Helena said public exposure would make every sterling relative look like a thief. I am not asking to look innocent. Her face changed. She needed shame to keep us quiet. If I accepted guilt that belonged to me, she lost the power to reveal it. I tore the statement. A dull impact sounded through the wall. 3 knocks. Pause. 2. Daniel and I had used that childhood signal for danger too close to name. Helena looked toward the second coffin. I moved. Security entered. Sophie screamed. The public doors opened early as guests arrived. Helena could no longer restrain me without witnesses. I walked to the second coffin and placed my hand on the lid. Cold. A faint vibration beneath it. My twin was inside. The lock required a 7-digit code. Sophie touched the signet ring. It has numbers inside. She removed it from the chain. Daniel had engraved our childhood address beneath the band. The code opened. The lid rose 2 inches. Sedative vapor escaped. Daniel lay inside wearing the suit from his consent video. His eyes opened. He looked at Sophie. Then Helena pressed the emergency seal remote. The coffin locked again. My brother's daughter had seen him alive. The family could no longer make survival theoretical. Daniel's first words were not "help me." They were "close it." The coffin microphone carried his voice through the lock. "Close it before Julian sees." Sophie pressed both hands against the lid. "Dad." His breathing changed. He had watched her grow through photographs, but a photograph never asks why. "Hi, Soph." One syllable broke 16 years of legal silence. Helena stepped toward the coffin. Security held position because 24 guests were filming. She lowered her voice. "Daniel is medically unstable. Opening the unit may cause respiratory failure." Entered the viewing room wearing plain clothes. "Then a hospital can handle it." Helena showed a treatment order signed by Dr. Sterling's medical director. It authorized transport to the crematory medical annex. A crematory with no hospital license. Identified herself. Guests moved back. The family lawyer objected. Sophie said, "Open it." The room obeyed the child, more than the law for 1 second. Then Daniel spoke again. "Don't." "Why?" "Because the coffin feed is live to Julian. He has Dad." Richard's body. The false bottom evidence. Julian had placed a destruction charge beneath the preparation table. If we removed Daniel before the memorial feed began, the charge would burn Richard's coffin and the documents inside. My twin had agreed to remain in the box to protect evidence. Another person offering his body to preserve a complete story. "No," I said. "Dad's recording proves everything. You are alive. So are 17 patients, because the archive survives. Not because you stay in a coffin." Daniel began coughing. Ordered the lid opened. Helena refused the code. Sophie held up the signet ring. I know it. My niece opened the coffin, and I lifted Daniel onto the carpet. He weighed far less than he should have. A medical port ran beneath his collar. Sedation had turned his skin gray. Sophie knelt near him but did not touch. Why didn't you come? Daniel looked at me. He wanted rescue from the question. I did not give it. I was sick, he said. Grandma said you chose not to. I did sometimes. Sophie stood. The honesty hurt her. The lie would have stolen more. Federal agents entered the memorial house, directed them toward the underground tunnel and preparation suite. Julian's voice came through every speaker. Removing Daniel triggered the crematory protocol. An alarm sounded below. Richard's coffin began moving on the automated transport belt, not toward the public viewing, toward the retort. Helena looked surprised. Julian was burning their father before the wake. He no longer trusted her to control the evidence. Daniel tried to stand. I know the tunnel. You cannot walk. I spent 11 years learning every route they used to move dead people. Wanted him transported to hospital. Daniel refused. After the coffin, his daughter said, "You don't get to die for evidence because you were too afraid to live for me." The room became silent. Daniel closed his eyes. Sophie had named the pattern more clearly than any investigator. He agreed to a wheelchair. We entered the embalming tunnel with 2 agents and Mr. Bell, who had arrived under federal protection. The transport belt carried Richard's coffin beneath blue emergency lights. The crematory system displayed 9 minutes until automatic ignition. Julian controlled the route remotely. Bell opened a maintenance gate. Daniel guided us through a side passage. At the final junction, we found 2 belts. One carried Richard's coffin. The other carried a sealed metal container marked clinical waste. Daniel pointed at the container. Julian Store's original identity drives there. Said we had time for one route. Save the coffin or recover the drives. A forced choice designed by a family that believed urgency made morality simple. I looked at Bell. Can you stop the belt? Not from here. Sophie's signet ring connected to the old family controls. Daniel had encoded more than a coffin number. He told her to place it against the junction reader. She did. The system requested one biometric voice phrase from Daniel. He said, "No burial without a name." Both belts stopped. Julian had built the technology. Richard had hidden the evidence. Helena had controlled the family. But Daniel's old cemetery rule still existed beneath their upgrades. The living man in the coffin had preserved one refusal inside the machine. No burial without a name. Richard did not die the night Helena announced his heart attack. He died 23 hours earlier. The preparation suite records showed his body entered Sterling Memorial before the family had been told he was ill. Julian adjusted the hospital time of death to align with Helena's public statement. The extra day gave them time to search the coffin, remove digital files, and record Daniel's consent video. They missed the false bottom, opened the compartment using the brass angel. Inside lay 6 drives, a handwritten burial ledger, share certificates, and Richard's final recorder. The first file showed Richard alive in his study. I have spent 30 years mistaking control for protection. He listed reused graves, stolen estates, false deaths, and clinic confinements. He named Helena, Julian, himself, Daniel, and me. No clean branch. Then he described his murder. Helena had replaced his heart medication with a drug that created the appearance of natural cardiac failure. She intended to weaken him before the wake, secure the will, and keep him under medical guardianship if he resisted. Julian increased the dose. Richard collapsed. They argued over whether to call an ambulance. Helena wanted him alive long enough to sign. Julian said the biometric archive could finish without him. Neither called. Richard recorded their voices through a watch hidden beneath his sleeve. The heart attack was a rehearsal for the same method they used on others. Create illness, control treatment, let paperwork complete the death. The second file changed the story again. Richard admitted helping Helena bury Daniel alive. Not during the flood. Before it, Daniel discovered the burial fraud and threatened to report. Helena drugged him. Richard found them inside the crypt before the storm. He could have stopped her. Instead, he locked the outer door while they argued about what to do. He told himself Daniel would wake, calm down, and agree to a private settlement. Then the flood valve opened. Helena claimed it malfunctioned. Richard believed her because belief protected the company. Bell rescued Daniel after Richard left. My father had not merely concealed the aftermath. He had helped create the trap. Daniel listened from the wheelchair. His face did not change. Perhaps he remembered. Perhaps hearing confession from the dead was less powerful than people imagine. Richard described the clinic. At first, Daniel could not remember his name. Richard used the false identity to prevent Helena reaching him. When memory returned, Daniel asked to see Sophie. Richard refused. He feared Helena would discover the survival, expose the grave fraud, and seize the company. Then Helena discovered anyway. The father who claimed to hide Daniel from her had actually hidden him for himself first. Richard said, "I loved my son. I also loved being the man whose company survived. Both." The third file named me. 8 years ago, I reviewed an anomaly showing burial plots resold under altered owner names. Richard told me a software migration caused duplication. I accepted the explanation and signed the correction report. The duplicated plots belonged to 4 families whose relatives had been moved. I had evidence, not the full crime, enough to ask more. I left the company later and built a career criticizing funeral industry consolidation. I never returned the dividends earned during those years. Richard knew exposure would damage my public work. He had kept my signature as leverage. Helena had referenced it. Shame was the family lock. Sophie asked, "Did everyone use dead people?" No one answered immediately. Belle finally said, "Yes." The simplicity mattered. Julian's identity drives revealed thousands of forged authorizations. Some used Daniel's face. Some used Richard's. Some used deceased clients. One folder contained Sophie. A synthetic adult version of her face had already been trained. Helena planned to use her future identity for trust approvals long after the wake. The child did not need to sign tomorrow. The system could make her approve forever. Federal agents seized the drives. Helena stood at the tunnel entrance under guard. She heard Richard's confession naming Julian's higher dose. Her face shifted. She had poisoned her husband. Her son had decided not to leave enough life for her to control. The alliance between mother and son ended exactly where all family power struggles end. At the moment one person realizes they were never the exception. Helena entered our family when Daniel and I were 11. Our mother had died 6 months earlier after falling from the cliff path behind the West Cemetery. Richard said grief made the details cruel and unnecessary. He refused to discuss the investigation. Helena arrived first as friend, then as the company's legal advisor, then as our stepmother. She remembered school forms, favorite meals, doctor visits, and the exact tone required to make criticism sound like guidance. Daniel hated her immediately. I tried to deserve her approval. That difference shaped everything. When Daniel accused Helena of moving cemetery records, she called him imaginative. When I found errors, she praised my precision and asked me to correct them quietly. She punished him through conflict. She controlled me through usefulness. At Richard's wake, Helena requested a private conversation before federal agents removed her. Allowed it under recording. Helena sat in the same arrangement room where the will had been read. "You always needed Daniel to be the wounded twin," she said. "He was buried alive, and you built a life from being the one who escaped." The sentence struck because I had thought versions of it. I became the responsible child after Daniel vanished. Richard promoted me. Helena introduced me as the daughter who understood duty. My career began with sympathy and family access. Daniel's death became part of my identity too. Helena said I never searched the clinic network seriously because mystery benefited me. I accepted Richard's claim that Daniel's remains were unrecoverable. I let the company hold a memorial without a body. "You were 29, she said, "not a child." "True. Did you kill?" I asked. Helena smiled without warmth. "Your mother stepped backward while arguing with Richard. You were there." "Yes." "Did you push her?" "No." "Did Dad?" "No." "Then why hide it?" "Because had discovered Richard's first grave transfer. She threatened to leave, take both of you, and report the company. During the argument, she moved away from him and fell." "An accident?" "Maybe." Richard and Helena removed notebook, changed the time of death, and presented the fall as solitary. They did not cause the step. They stole the truth after it. That theft created the family Helena later entered. She said Richard asked her to help protect the twins from scandal. "Then you married him. Eventually, you replaced her." "No one replaces the dead. We occupy the space people refuse to leave empty." It sounded profound enough to hide ambition. I asked why she buried Daniel. He was going to expose all of us. He was 29. He was reckless. He was right. Those are not opposites. The family's favorite defense. Helena admitted drugging him, admitted placing him in the crypt, opening the flood valve. She said Richard locked the outer door and left. Julian, then 22, found the control panel and opened the valve to frighten Daniel into surrender. My stepbrother had tried to drown him. Richard believed Helena did it. Helena allowed the belief because it gave her leverage over her husband. Julian later believed Richard knew. 3 people preserved different versions of guilt because uncertainty kept them useful to one another. Why keep Daniel alive after you found him? His shares, the first unadorned answer. And Sophie, I raised her. You controlled her. I loved her. Both could be true. Helena said she protected Sophie from Daniel's instability, Richard's guilt, Julian's ambition, and my need to turn every family wound into public justice. You think exposure is not control? She asked. You decide the world deserves every private pain because you prefer your power moral. The recording light blinked between us. The wake cameras waited outside. I had planned a live reveal. She was warning me that revenge could wear transparency as a costume. I said, Sophie will decide what becomes public. For the first time, Helena had no immediate reply. The evidence belonged to victims, not my narrative. Entered. Helena stood. Before leaving, she said, Daniel will disappoint you. He already has. That answer unsettled her. I did not need my twin innocent to oppose what they did to him. Helena had raised me to doubt myself whenever certainty threatened her. Now doubt could serve another purpose. It could prevent me from turning justice into inheritance. Julian was arrested beneath the crematory control room. He surrendered only after Sophie's signet ring disabled the evidence belts and federal agents cut the external network. His first request was not a lawyer. Continue the wake. The statement confused everyone except Helena. Sterling Memorial Group's board ratification had to occur during Richard's officially scheduled memorial period. If the wake ended without a vote, the company entered emergency receivership under a creditor agreement. Julian wanted control preserved even from jail. He offered the remaining identity passwords in exchange for a remote appearance. The federal prosecutor refused. Then 3 Sterling facilities reported payment failures. Resident care accounts froze. Funeral transports stopped. Burial permits vanished from local systems. Julian had tied ordinary operations to the board vote. Thousands of families became leverage. He called it continuity protection, the same argument each Sterling used. Asked whether I could access the systems. I had worked compliance, not technology. Daniel knew part of the architecture from clinic consent recordings. Sophie knew the signet controls. Bell knew cemetery operations. The family had distributed enough knowledge to prevent one person seizing everything. Accidentally safer than intention. We decided the public memorial would continue under court supervision. The wake would become an evidence hearing and emergency transition. No Helena at the head table. No Julian controlling the feed. No secret guardianship blessing. Sophie asked whether she had to appear. No, I said. The board lawyer said her trust vote required presence. Daniel said, then the vote waits. The lawyer warned facilities could fail. Sophie looked at the patient lists. She chose to attend for the operational transfer, not the guardianship. The distinction entered the court order. Her decision, not our use of her. At 8:00 p.m., Richard's wake began. The conservatory held executives, clergy, cemetery families, former employees, regulators, and journalists. Federal agents stood beside flower arrangements. Richard's coffin remained at the front, false bottom open. Daniel entered through a side door in a wheelchair. The room inhaled. The dead son had arrived at the dead father's wake. Cameras lifted. Sophie remained behind a privacy screen by choice. Daniel asked that no one photograph him until he finished speaking. Some ignored him. The judge ordered the feed to blur his face. For the first time, Sterling's identity technology protected the living instead of manufacturing consent. Julian appeared by court video from detention because he alone could unlock the operating ledger. He smiled when the public feed connected. He believed the wake had returned to his design. Helena appeared from a separate interview room. Mother and son looked at each other through split screens. Richard's portrait hung between them. I opened the memorial. My father built a company around the promise that death should be handled with dignity. Then I placed the substituted body records on the screen. His company learned that dignity was easiest to sell when the dead could not correct the paperwork. The audience shifted. Families recognized names. Daniel read his own legal death certificate. Bell read the funeral record of the stranger, buried under his identity. June Price's sister appeared by video and identified Samuel Price as the man used in Bell's grave. The unclaimed dead gained relatives one by one. Julian interrupted. He said operational systems would lock in 40 minutes unless the board voted. The emergency judge asked what he demanded. A qualified chair. Helena said me. Julian laughed. He named himself, even arrested, even exposed. Neither could imagine survival without ownership. The judge asked whether an independent receiver could access the accounts. Julian said no. Daniel said he is lying. My twin had inserted a secondary access phrase during 11 years of forced consent work, a phrase hidden inside the cemetery protocols. No burial without a name. Sophie spoke from behind the screen. The system recognized her trust voice. Daniel entered the phrase. Bell entered the cemetery key. I entered Richard's share certificate code. 3 people, no single sterling. The operating ledger opened for the receiver. Julian's leverage vanished on live video. His face changed. Then the memorial screens displayed a new file he had scheduled in advance. Elise Sterling, final confession. My own recorded voice filled the room. I knew the graves were being reused. The sentence was real. The rest had been edited. Julian had prepared the wake to expose me too. The confession used my voice from 8 years of interviews, board meetings, and public speeches. I knew the graves were being reused. I approved the correction. I accepted the dividends. I chose not to report. Each sentence came from a different context. Together, they created a cleaner crime than the truth. The audience turned toward me. Julian said, "You wanted accountability. Begin with yourself." He expected denial. I asked the technician to pause the video. Then I read the transcript aloud. The first sentence came from a compliance meeting where I said, "If we knew the graves were being reused, the entire transfer process would be criminal." He removed "if." The second came from my approval of a software correction, not body relocation. The third was true. I accepted dividends. The fourth was partly true. I chose an internal review instead of reporting regulators. After Richard told me the anomalies came from migration errors. I had evidence of irregularity, not the full scheme, enough to ask harder questions. I said so. Julian tried to speak. The judge muted him. I continued. I did not bury Daniel. I did not imprison the Orison patients. I did not poison Richard, stage Thomas Bell's death, or move bodies from graves. I was framed for parts of this. I also benefited from a company whose explanations I preferred to investigate internally. No false purity, no acceptance of murders I did not commit. The audience did not receive the satisfying choice Julian prepared. Innocent or corrupt sister. Both categories failed. Daniel requested the microphone. He admitted recording consent videos for living dead patients. He named Collins and 10 others. I told myself each cooperation kept them fed and gave me access to my daughter's photographs. Sophie remained behind the screen. Daniel looked toward it. That explanation is true. It is not enough. Bell admitted signing false burial transfers. The family lawyer admitted drafting sealed guardianship orders. One by one, the confession stopped being a weapon and became sequence. Julian shouted that distributed guilt proved no single person controlled the system. The prosecutor answered, "Shared guilt is not no guilt." Helena watched silently. Her strategy had always relied on everyone fearing exposure. We were removing fear by naming specific acts. Then Julian played a second file, security footage from the night Richard died. I entered my father's study at 7:12 p.m. Richard died at 9:03. I had told I last saw him 2 days earlier. The footage was real. I had lied. Looked at me. I remembered the visit. Richard called me after discovering Daniel's new consent video. He wanted me to take the recorder from the coffin plan and publish only Helena's crimes. He intended to hide his own role, Bell's, Daniel's, and mine. I refused. We argued. He begged me to protect the Sterling name, so Sophie would retain value in her shares. I said maybe the name should die. Then I left. Why had I concealed the meeting? Because Richard asked me to. Because exposure before the wake might cause Helena to move Daniel. Because I feared the argument made me look capable of murder. All three. Julian displayed the glass I touched in Richard's study. My fingerprints, the medication bottle beside it. I had moved the bottle while accusing him of hiding behind illness. The prosecution could not yet prove Helena or Julian altered the dose. My lie gave them reasonable doubt. Helena finally spoke. Was the last family member alone with Richard? A true sentence placed toward a false conclusion. Approached the microphone. She said Richard's watch recorded voices after my departure. Helena and Julian. But Julian interrupted. The watch file is synthetic. Our own platform created it. What? He had designed the system to make authentic evidence deniable. Then Daniel said, Dad kept analog tape. The coffin's brass angel was hollow. Inside it, Bell found a miniature cassette. Richard had returned to old technology because the family controlled every new proof. The tape contained my departure, Helena's arrival, Julian's argument, the medication dose, and one final voice no one expected. Sophie. She had been in Richard's study the night he died. Sophie was 16, old enough to testify, young enough for every adult to claim testimony would damage her. The judge cleared the conservatory except for counsel, investigators, Daniel, me, and one advocate Sophie chose. The public feed paused. Sophie stepped from behind the privacy screen. She looked at Richard's coffin, then at her father. I went to Grandpa because Grandma said Dad was alive. Daniel closed his eyes. Helena had told Sophie before the will reading, not out of honesty, to use her. Sophie said Richard admitted Daniel survived, but refused to reveal the clinic. He told her Helena would destroy the company if the secret emerged before he completed a transition. Everyone in the family treated timing as morality. Sophie hid in the library corridor after Richard sent her away. I entered. She heard our argument. Then I left. Helena arrived with Julian. Richard told them he had recorded a confession and placed it in the coffin. Helena said he would sign the new will first. Richard refused. Julian placed a tablet in front of him. Daniel's synthetic face appeared. The consent video. Richard realized Julian had taken Daniel. He reached for the phone. Helena removed it. Then she opened Richard's medication case. Sophie could not see which bottle she changed. Julian said, "That dose will kill him." Helena answered, "Not before he signs." Richard refused again. Julian increased something on the injector. Helena grabbed his wrist. They argued. Richard collapsed. Sophie remained hidden. She did not call for help. Her voice broke. I thought if they left, I could. They did not leave for 19 minutes. By the time they moved Richard into the chair and staged the medical alarm, he had stopped breathing. Sophie recorded part of the argument on her phone. Julian discovered the device later and deleted the file. She believed it was gone. The family's automatic cloud backup preserved a fragment under Daniel's old parent account. That was how he sent the first message. From the clinic, Daniel had access to Sophie's backup notifications. He heard her recording and realized Richard was dead before the public announcement. He used his old number to contact me. My twin had not escaped technology. He learned how to use one hidden route inside it. Sophie looked at Helena. "You told me Dad was too sick to love me." Helena said, "I raised you when he would not." "I know." The answer surprised her. Sophie continued, "You loved me. You also wanted my shares." "Both." Helena began crying. Real tears. They did not change the statement. Julian requested the feed resume, and the testimony remained sealed, because Sophie was a minor. She said, "I want the part about Grandpa public, not the part about me hiding." The judge divided the record. Her choice controlled the boundary. The public feed resumed with an edited evidence summary approved by Sophie and the advocate. No graphic details, no image of her face, enough to establish Helena and Julian's actions. The prosecutor announced murder charges would follow. Helena said Richard had already signed the will. The board transition remained legal. Daniel was alive, but she held his guardianship order. Sophie's shares remained controlled by the family. The law could arrest people faster than it removed documents. Julian smiled from the detention screen. He still believed the structure would outlive the scandal. Then Collins entered the conservatory, one of Orison's living dead patients. She carried 17 original court files. Every guardianship order used the same hidden judge signature. The orders were forged before filing. Daniel's guardianship was invalid. Sophie's trust reverted to Daniel. Daniel looked at his daughter, then at the board. He said, "I transfer my shares into restitution." The lawyer warned he needed an assessment. Daniel laughed. "Competent enough when Helena needed my signature." He completed the transfer using 3 independent witnesses and an outside court officer. Sterling family control fell below majority for the first time in 87 years. Sophie asked him, "Does that mean you gave away my inheritance?" "Yes." She nodded slowly. "Good." The child every adult claimed to protect had become the first Sterling willing to lose the company without asking who could own it next. The public wake resumed at midnight. Richard's coffin remained open. No clergy, no music, no prepared eulogy. The federal judge converted the conservatory into an emergency evidentiary session because witnesses, records, and defendants were already present. A murder hearing inside a funeral, appropriate for Sterling Memorial. The analog tape played first. My argument with Richard, my departure, Helena demanding the signature, Julian increasing the dose. Richard's final words, You keep calling the company a family because companies are not supposed to forgive you. No one spoke after that. Then came the cemetery ledger. 312 plots resold. 89 bodies moved without family consent. 26 estates transferred through forged death authorizations. 17 living people legally erased. The scale changed the room. Richard's murder was intimate. The system around it was industrial. Families joined by video. A woman asked where her husband's remains had been moved. Bell gave coordinates. A son asked why his mother's savings funded a sterling acquisition. The receiver displayed the transfer. No dramatic answer repaired either. Helena's lawyer argued she had modernized a failing family business and inherited practices Richard created. True, Julian's lawyer argued. He grew up inside a company where identity manipulation was normal. True, Daniel's lawyer described coercion at Orison. True, my regulator described the report I signed. True, complexity arrived, not as excuse, as map. Then a former embalmer named Rosa. 12 years earlier, she saw Helena place Daniel in the crypt after sedation. Richard ordered Rosa to prepare an unclaimed body for a closed casket memorial if no remains were recovered. The substitute was never used because Richard chose an empty coffin. Rosa quit. Helena threatened her immigration status. She remained silent until the Orison archive release showed her brother had also been declared dead through sterling records. The system did not only target wealthy heirs, it selected people whose objections could be made expensive. Rosa said Julian opened the flood valve. Helena knew. She did not stop him. Richard knew afterward. He concealed it. Bell rescued Daniel, then joined the concealment. Daniel recovered and later participated. I accepted explanations. Every relative occupied a different point in the same chain. Julian interrupted to accuse Helena of ordering Richard's death. She replied that Julian delivered the fatal dose. Their alliance became prosecution. The judge warned them. Neither stopped. Helena said Julian caused fall. The room changed. My mother, Julian had been 10 when died. Helena said not the cliff fall itself. The confrontation. He discovered copying grave records and told Richard. Richard followed her to the path. Helena arrived, backed away and fell. Julian's childhood report triggered the argument. He had carried guilt for years. Helena used it to control him. Julian shouted, "You told me she wanted to take everything. I told you the truth. You told a child to spy." Their history did not reduce his adult crimes. It explained the shape of loyalty. Richard had trained all of us to report one another upward. Helena perfected it. The family survived through internal surveillance long before Julian built software. Sophie's advocate requested she leave. She agreed. Daniel watched her go. He did not ask her to remain for his testimony. A small correction. When my turn came, I described the report, dividends, silence, crypt rescue, and decision to delay police entry. I admitted wanting the live wake because public exposure felt like revenge. The judge asked whether that made the evidence unreliable. No. What? Does it make your motive pure? No. The truth did not require sainthood. At 2:14 a.m., the prosecutor formally charged Helena and Julian with Richard's murder, conspiracy in Daniel's attempted murder, unlawful confinement, identity fraud, and multiple financial crimes. Richard could not be charged. His coffin held his confession instead. Bell asked whether the wake could end. The judge said yes. No one offered a prayer. Sophie returned long enough to place Daniel's signet ring beside Richard's hand, not as inheritance, as returned property. Then the coffin closed. The family business had spent a century controlling final images. Richard left the room without one. Daniel entered hospital after the wake. He had muscle loss, untreated seizures, medication dependence, and permanent damage from the crypt flood. He also had choices he had hidden behind illness. 3 days later, he asked to speak with Sophie and me together. The advocate recommended separate meetings. Sophie chose together. Daniel began with the truth, most likely to make him look understandable. Richard threatened that Helena would take Sophie if he surfaced. Then the harder truth. After 6 months at Orison, Daniel's memory returned enough to identify himself. Bell offered to take him to police. Daniel refused. Richard promised money, private care, and access to Sophie's life if he remained legally dead until the company stabilized. He agreed. At first for 1 year, then another. When Helena discovered him, she threatened exposure as an unstable father who had abandoned his child. She also offered more photographs, school records, and supervised hidden visits from a distance. He accepted. I watched you at the park twice, he told Sophie. She stared. You were there? Yes. Why didn't you come over? I was afraid. Of Grandma. Of losing the arrangement. The sentence was devastating, because the arrangement already cost her a father. Daniel admitted creating consent videos for other patients. He believed compliance prevented harsher treatment. Sometimes it did. He also received privileges. A private room, internet access, Sophie's files. His survival developed benefits he feared losing. He had not remained dead only because Helena forced him. Sophie asked, "Did you love me?" Yes. Then why wasn't love enough? No adult answer could satisfy. Daniel said, because I was weak. Helena had called him unstable. Richard called him strategic. Daniel called himself weak. I said, you were injured, coerced, and you made harmful choices. He looked at me. I refused both simplifications. Sophie asked whether he expected to live with us after release. No, Daniel said. The answer was the first thing that relieved her. He would enter independent rehabilitation. Contact would occur at Sophie's pace. No instant reunion. No father restored by evidence. She chose letters first. Daniel agreed. After she left, he asked whether I hated him. Sometimes. Do you forgive me? I don't know. He laughed weakly. We used to know everything at the same time. We thought we did. Twins attract myths of perfect connection. Our family used the myth too. Richard said I should have known Daniel lived. Helena said his instability reflected my obsession. Julian used my voice to make his crimes feel like shared identity. We were separate people. That truth arrived late. Daniel gave me one final file from Orison, a video of Richard offering me the chief executive role after Daniel's disappearance. I had forgotten the conversation. Richard said the company needed the surviving twin to reassure investors. I accepted for 9 months before leaving compliance. My promotion followed Daniel's legal death. His absence benefited me directly. I had told myself I stepped in for family. The board salary paid my house deposit. The public sympathy launched my career. I did not cause his burial. I did build a life partly from the space it created. Daniel said Helena kept the file to use against me. Does it change what she did? No. Does it change you? Yes. That was enough. I asked why he sent the message about the West Crypt only after Richard died. He said Richard controlled his hidden phone access. When Sophie's recording backed up, Daniel understood the wake would either kill him or make Helena his permanent guardian. He acted when waiting became more dangerous than truth. Not courage. Threshold. Many disclosures begin there. Before I left, Daniel said Richard planned his coffin as a confession because he knew none of us would trust a living conversation. He thought death would make him honest. Did it? No. The recorder told the truth. Richard still chose when we would carry it. Even confession had been control. Daniel and I had survived different parts of our father. Neither of us inherited the right to explain the other. Helena requested a family meeting before trial. Not a legal strategy session. A family meeting. She had used that phrase before every childhood punishment. The court allowed separate glass partitions and recording. Sophie declined. Daniel attended by video. Julian appeared from another facility. I sat across from Helena. She looked smaller without sterling staff arranging the room. I loved all of you, she said. Julian laughed. Daniel looked away. I believed her. That was the problem. Helena loved Richard's admiration, Julian's dependence, my competence, Daniel's vulnerability, and Sophie's trust. She loved people through the functions they performed inside her idea of family. When functions changed, love became discipline. She said death forced her into a company already corrupt. Richard asked her to repair records, calm creditors, and raise twins grieving a mother. She did. Then she discovered control work. The graves funded acquisitions. Sealed guardianships prevented litigation. False deaths protected assets. One compromise made the next feel procedural. Why Daniel? I asked. He would have destroyed everything in one day. He was right. He did not understand consequences. Neither did the bodies you moved. Helena closed her eyes. Julian asked why she allowed him to increase Richard's dose. She said, I thought you would stop. He stared. A mother outsourcing conscience to the son she trained not to disobey. Daniel asked whether she ever planned to release him. After Sophie turned 18. She is 16. I was close. He laughed without humor. Captors measure time differently. Helena told me she always considered me her real daughter because I understood responsibility. The praise no longer entered where it used to. You mean I made your choices look respectable? Her face tightened. Yes. honest enough to hurt. She asked whether I would testify that Richard created the grave scheme. Yes. Will you say Julian opened the flood valve? Yes. Will you say I tried to keep the dose below fatal? If evidence supports it, will you say I am not a murderer? No. She looked betrayed, as though accuracy owed her conclusion. Helena said Julian killed Richard by raising the dose. Julian said she replaced the medication and the phone. The prosecutor would divide liability. The family wanted one person to carry the verb. I refused. Daniel asked Julian why he opened the flood valve 12 years ago. Julian's face changed. I was 22. Why? Mom said you would ruin Dad. That is not why. Julian looked at Sophie's empty chair, then said, because Dad compared me to you. There it was. Not company survival, not coercion alone. Jealousy. Richard called Daniel the true heir after he challenged the burial records. Julian believed frightening him into silence would prove loyalty. He opened the valve for 30 seconds. The mechanism jammed. Bell arrived. Julian fled. Helena later discovered what he had done and told him Daniel died. She used his guilt for years. The attempted murder began in a son wanting his father's approval. Systems are built from motives smaller than the consequences they create. Helena began crying. She said Richard made everyone compete. True, she still chose the rules that followed. The meeting ended without reconciliation. As guards removed her, Helena turned toward me. Family will remain after verdicts. Yes. Hope appeared. I continued. Relationship may not. She stopped. Blood described history. It did not guarantee access. Julian asked whether I would visit again. No. Daniel said nothing. Later, Sophie asked for the recording. The advocate warned it might be harmful. She chose selected parts. She heard Helena say she loved everyone, then heard the rest. Sophie said maybe she did. I nodded. Does that make it worse? Sometimes. Love does not excuse ownership. It explains why leaving it can feel like betrayal, even when staying is dangerous. Helena and Julian blamed each other at trial. Their lawyers sat 6 feet apart and used the same family photographs to tell opposite stories. Helena as coerced wife, Julian as manipulated son, Richard as controlling patriarch, Daniel as unstable, me as ambitious surviving twin, Sophie as vulnerable heir. Every person became evidence before becoming human. The prosecution separated acts. Helena drugged Daniel, placed him in the crypt, concealed his survival, controlled the clinic, altered Richard's medication, and prevented emergency help. Julian opened the flood valve, built identity forgeries, staged Bell's death, increased Richard's fatal dose, and directed the destruction of evidence after the wake. I caught myself again while preparing testimony. The scale of repeated family stories can make names interchangeable. That was exactly what Sterling Systems had done to bodies. I wrote the correct names before me. Richard Sterling, Thomas Bell, Samuel Price, Daniel Sterling, the 89 relocated dead, the 17 living people declared dead. Accuracy was resistance. Helena was convicted of conspiracy to murder Daniel, unlawful confinement, Richard's murder as an accomplice, identity fraud, grave desecration, financial crimes, and obstruction. Julian was convicted of attempted murder in Daniel's case, Richard's murder, kidnapping, evidence destruction, identity fraud, and financial conspiracy. The jury split responsibility for Richard's death. Helena created the poisoning plan and prevented rescue. Julian delivered the fatal increase. Neither became the sole cause. Sval produced no murder charge. Evidence supported concealment, not intentional killing. That uncertainty remained. Bell received immunity for cooperation on burial records, but pleaded guilty to obstruction and false certification. Daniel received a reduced charge for coerced identity fraud. He accepted responsibility for 11 consent videos. I faced regulatory proceedings and civil claims. Sophie's trust entered restitution. No one walked out clean because the prosecutor had found the correct villain. There was no correct singular. At sentencing, Helena addressed Sophie. The judge stopped direct contact because she had declined it. Helena spoke to the court instead. I raised a child who was not mine because her father would not. Daniel lowered his head. True, I protected her from scandal. False in the way, a locked room can be called shelter. I loved her. True, the judge said love increased responsibility. It did not reduce it. Helena received a life sentence with review after 30 years. Julian received life with a longer minimum. He did not look at Helena. The mother and son who controlled the family together left in separate vehicles. Daniel entered a secure rehabilitation program, not prison, after the court recognized prolonged coercion and serious injury. He still faced supervision, restitution, and restrictions on identity systems. Some families of the clinic patients believed that was too lenient. Others said punishing him, like Helena, ignored captivity. Both views carried weight. My professional board suspended my license for 5 years and ordered repayment of dividends linked to the disputed burial period. I sold my house. Sophie's inheritance was reduced to an education account after restitution claims. She said good. Money had become another room she wanted unlocked. The receiver dissolved Sterling Memorial Group and transferred funeral homes to regional nonprofits. Cemetery land moved into public trusts with family advisory boards. The West Crypt was excavated. No one was buried there again. Richard's remains went to a municipal cemetery under a simple marker. No family mausoleum. No carved angels. His name, dates, and one line selected by Sophie. He told the truth too late. Some called it cruel. It was accurate. The trial put our family on 2 sides of a courtroom. Guilty and witness. Victim and participant. Parent and child. But every person crossed more than one line. The law assigned verdicts. It did not simplify the family. That part remained our work. After the trial, Sophie refused to live with any Sterling. Not Helena. Not Daniel. Not me. She chose a host family approved through an independent youth service for 6 months. My first reaction was pain. My second was an argument. I stopped before turning either into pressure. She had spent 12 years moving between adults who called proximity love. Distance was her first uncontested decision. Daniel struggled more. He said he had already lost enough time. The advocate replied, that does not make her responsible for replacing it. He accepted the answer badly, then honestly. Sophie attended school under a privacy order. She blocked media, family lawyers, and relatives from contacting her directly. We each received one email address managed by the advocate. I wrote once a week. No questions requiring an answer. No guilt. No updates about how much I missed her. At first, she did not reply. Daniel wrote apologies, so long the advocate returned them. He learned to send 3 sentences. I am in treatment. I am not asking you to forgive me. I will answer questions when you want. After 2 months, Sophie sent him one. What was my favorite toy at 4? Daniel did not know. He wrote that. Helena would have known. Care and control had shared 12 years of memories. Sophie grieved the person who remembered while rejecting the person who owned. The distinction exhausted her. She asked me whether I still thought Daniel, and I had a twin connection. Less than before. Why? Because I used the idea to believe I understood choices he never told me. She said, adults do that with children too. Yes, the host family had no Sterling history, no company shares, and no claim to save her. They made dinner, enforced school nights, and asked permission before posting photographs. Ordinary structure felt unfamiliar. After 6 months, Sophie chose to live with me temporarily while Daniel continued rehabilitation. Not because I had earned the role through exposure. Because she selected it. We wrote a household agreement. She could lock her room. Her therapy records belonged to her. No interviews. No family evidence stored in the house. No surprise visits from Daniel or Belle. I would answer questions without turning them into lessons. She added one rule. Do not say I did it for you after doing something I did not ask for. I signed. The sentence should have been carved above every Sterling door. Daniel visited after 3 more months. At a public, 1 hour, Sophie asked whether he wanted to be called Dad. He said, only if you want to. She called him Daniel. He survived it. They began building a relationship, not based on reclaiming the past. Belle moved into assisted living outside the county. He sent Sophie a box of childhood letters Daniel wrote, but Richard. She chose not to read them yet. The letters waited without becoming a demand. I began repaying dividends into the cemetery restitution fund. The amount would take years. A journalist asked whether the payments were symbolic. No, they were money. Specific, limited, insufficient. Symbols can become another escape from arithmetic. Sophie's 6 months away hurt all of us. That did not make the choice wrong. A family accustomed to confinement learned that someone leaving could be the healthiest act in the story. The cemetery review took 4 years. Not every grave, every record. Ground-penetrating scans identified mismatched vaults, empty plots, and unregistered remains. Families were privately before public reports. Some wanted exhumation. Some wanted the site left undisturbed. Some wanted money. Some wanted names. No single form of justice fit the dead. The West Cemetery closed during the process. Its marble gates remained locked, but not to protect Sterling's secrets, to prevent media from filming families. The receiver created a council, made mostly of affected relatives. No Sterling majority. Bell served as a technical advisor without voting rights. Daniel contributed tunnel maps. I audited transactions under supervision. Sophie participated only once, to request that the West Crypt not become a tourist exhibit. The council agreed. It was dismantled, stone by stone. The room where Helena drugged Daniel, and where we almost drowned, became ordinary rubble. Some historians objected that destruction erased evidence. The evidence had been documented. The survivor did not owe the building permanent existence. 89 relocated people were identified. 73 families chose reburial. 9 chose cremation. 7 could not be located. Their names went on a public memorial without claiming consent from descendants we had not found. Samuel Price, the man buried under Bell's name, returned to his sisters. She said his life had been treated as empty because he died without money or close contact. The fact that she came later did not make him less named. Richard's burial ledger became part of a national inquiry into funeral home probate services. New laws required independent confirmation before funeral companies could manage abandoned estates or move remains. Rules that sounded obvious after people had spent decades profiting from their absence. Helena appealed. Julian appealed. Both lost. Daniel completed rehabilitation and moved into supported housing near Sophie's school. She visited once a month, then more often. She still called him Daniel. At 17, she called him Dad accidentally while asking for salt. Everyone froze. Daniel passed the salt. He did not turn the word into a ceremony. That restraint gave it a chance to return. My license was restored with conditions. I chose not to work for funeral companies. I joined the public cemetery audit office. The first case involved a small family business whose records were disorganized, not criminal. I noticed myself expecting conspiracy. Trauma can become another form of certainty. I asked for evidence instead of trusting instinct. No fraud, only negligence. We corrected it. Not every error was a Sterling plot. Learning that mattered too. At the final cemetery hearing, a council member asked whether the Sterling family should issue a collective apology. There was no collective person left authorized to speak. Helena would not. Julian could not. Richard was dead. Daniel Bell and I had individual statements. Sophie refused. The council decided against one family apology. Specific people would address specific acts. No brand-level regret. Sterling Memorial had used the family name to blur responsibility. Justice would not repeat it. We opened every record. Not every wound. Those belonged to the people carrying them. Daniel never moved into my house. That surprised people. Documentaries wanted the final image of reunited twins sharing a kitchen after 12 stolen years. Reality did not cooperate. He needed routine, medical care, and distance from family intensity. I needed to stop confusing proximity with repair. We met every Sunday at a halfway between our homes. At first, we discussed evidence, then medication, then Sophie, eventually ordinary things. Weather, books, a terrible football match. The absence of drama felt unnatural. One Sunday, Daniel brought the childhood photograph Richard used in his office. The two of us at 10, wearing matching coats, irritated by the camera. Helena said we were impossible to separate, he said. We separated easily. No, they separated the records, we did the rest. He admitted he sometimes resented me for living publicly. I admitted resenting him for returning complicated. The dead twin had been easy to love. He never contradicted my memory. The living man had made choices, harmed people, and did not fit the brother I mourned. Daniel said, I came back without coming home. That may be the honest version. Sophie graduated school the following spring. She invited both of us. Separate seats. No Helena. No Julian. Belle attended with a nurse. When Sophie crossed the stage, Daniel cried. I did too. Neither claimed the moment as repayment. After graduation, she announced she would study social policy and digital identity law. I worried the family crimes had selected her career. She said maybe it is still my choice. Good correction. The remaining education trust covered tuition. She refused additional money from documentary rights and the sale of Sterling artifacts. The family name remained valuable as spectacle. She did not want the income. I accepted one paid interview for the public cemetery archive. with Sophie's approval and no use of her private testimony. The interviewer asked whether Helena was evil. I said she loved us and committed terrible crimes. He asked whether Richard redeemed himself through the coffin confession. No. Did Daniel? That is not mine to grant. Did you? No. He looked disappointed. Media prefers moral accounts that close. Families do too. Daniel received a letter from Helena after 10 years in prison. She wrote that she had forgiven him for exposing her. The sentence made us laugh. Then it made him cry. Even confined, she positioned herself as the person who granted release. He did not answer. I asked if that felt unfinished. Everything is unfinished. We drank coffee. No resolution arrived. When Bell died at 81, his funeral took place in a public chapel. He had written instructions forbidding sterling services, expensive caskets, and substitution of any kind. His body was identified by 2 independent witnesses and his niece. A simple procedure, a radical request because of what we had done. Daniel spoke. He did not call Bell a hero. He said Bell rescued him, concealed him, lied for Richard, later preserved evidence, and finally, the whole sequence. Bell's niece thanked him. No one applauded. Afterward, Daniel and I walked through the municipal cemetery. He asked where I wanted to be buried. I haven't decided. Good. Sterlings had spent generations deciding death too early for other people. We could leave some choices open. My twin returned. He did not restore the family. He became a separate person allowed to remain. 10 years after Richard's wake, the last Sterling sign came down. The original memorial house had become the county center for funeral rites and identity protection. Its arrangement rooms offered free legal advice, independent price comparisons, and assistance locating remains. The stained glass angels remained. The sales scripts did not. The preparation suite became a training room on consent, body identification, and conflicts of interest. Richard's false bottom coffin sat in an archive, closed with no body inside. A label described what it contained. Not a monument to confession, evidence of delayed truth. The West Crypt had become a garden with no family plaques. Sophie chose native trees instead of marble. At 26, she took control of the remainder of her education trust. The amount was modest. She donated half to legal services for people challenging abusive guardianships and kept half for a small apartment. Daniel asked whether she was sure. She said yes. He did not ask again. That restraint was part of being her father now. She called him Dad regularly, but not every time. He never corrected either name. I attended the final receiver meeting. The chair asked whether any Sterling wanted to retain ceremonial involvement. No, the family business lost our name because no one inherited the right to represent the dead. Outside, a crew removed the brass letters from the facade. STERLING. One by one, people stopped to watch. I expected grief. Instead, I felt the strange lightness of a debt becoming specific. The crimes remained. The name no longer organized them into legacy. Helena died in prison that winter. Her were left personal letters to all of us. Sophie declined hers. Daniel read his and burned it. I opened mine. Helena wrote, "You became the daughter I knew you could be, even though you destroyed everything I built." The old compliment, usefulness wrapped around control. I placed the letter in the archive with a note. No response required. Julian remained in prison. He continued filing appeals and publishing essays about digital evidence. Some technical warnings were valid. The center used one of his recommendations after independent review. Guilty people can produce useful facts. Usefulness does not erase guilt. Richard's grave stayed simple. His death record was amended to state that she fell during a confrontation and that the family concealed material evidence. No one could prove a push. Uncertainty remained on the stone of history. We did not fill it with the story we preferred. Daniel and I visited both graves once a year, not together with Sophie unless she chose. This year she came. She brought no flowers. At Smarker, she asked what our mother was like. I described her laugh, impatience, red coat, and habit of reading the last page of novels first. Daniel remembered different things. We did not compete. At Richard's grave, Sophie read the line she selected. He told the truth too late. "Do you still think that is fair?" I asked. "Yes." Then she added, "At least he told some." Both. The family had once treated contradiction as weakness because simple stories were easier to control. We learned to let two truths remain without forcing one to disappear. On the way out, we passed the garden where the West Crypt had stood. Children from a community group planted bulbs near the old foundation. No one told them what happened there. They knew it was a garden. The past did not require every future visitor to perform our pain. Daniel stopped beside the path. 12 years, he said. What? The time I was dead. Sophie took his hand, not because a document required it, not because a camera waited, because she chose. I walked beside them without joining. The moment did not need one family shape. Behind us, the final sterling letters were loaded onto a truck. Ahead, the center's new sign carried no surname. The business built around controlling death had lost our name. The living kept theirs by deciding what those names meant.
I see their eyes, they watch me fall. They laugh and think I've lost it all. I shut the doors, locked up inside, believing I've nowhere left to hide. But I'm drowning in my own doubt. I built the cage and locked it out. Trapped in failure, I can't escape. Stuck in the past, bound by fate. I scream for help and no one hears. I'm drowning in my deepest fears. I built the cave and locked it out. Trapped in failure, I can't escape. Stuck in the past, bound by fate. I scream for help and no one hears. I'm drowning in my deepest fears. They've forgotten who I am, the one who rose and took a stand. Now I'm silent, broken, small, but I refuse to lose it all. I built these walls, now I'll break through. No one can control what I do. I built these walls, now